In today's episode of the Platform Presents podcast, I am here with Christian Beatty, and he's hailing over as the head of marketing at SPOTIO. And SPOTIO is all about helping you guys to generate more field sales revenue. It's a very interesting industry. I'm curious to deep dive into, what SPOTIO is all about. And how Christian and the team are thinking about growth, and also tapping a little bit into Christian's history as a marketer. He's been a marketer, a founder, a director of marketing, so comes with a very, very good perspective there on what it means to grow digital companies. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. So SPOTIO is a field, what we call a field sales engagement platform. It's a relatively new paradigm for the industry. People are, if you're a sales professional, you're probably familiar with CRMs like Salesforce, and maybe you're using some cool stuff like SalesLoft or Outreach or VanillaSoft. Those are typically really powerful tools, and they're really well geared towards inside sales teams. The minute you try to close down your laptop and walk out the door with those apps and those pieces of software, it becomes kind of a challenge. If you're walking around neighborhoods, if you're walking around business complexes, trying to knock on doors and use those things at the same time. So our software is actually kind of one of the first, we're a bit of a pioneer in this space, taking those capabilities that you might see in a traditional inside sales CRM or SEP, like an Outreach or SalesLoft analog, and really gearing them, making it purpose-built for a field sales team. Field sales actually makes up the majority of all sales teams. 71% of all sales is field sales, but it's a very low-tech industry. It's a low-tech part of the, and so there are companies who are, multi-million-dollar annual revenue companies, and they're still running things on Google spreadsheets. Just because there's really nothing available for them. So that's the space that we play in. You can imagine being in an industry where your audience is sort of a technology laggard. The challenge is, really about education. So that tends to be where we focus most of our attention. And we've built a pretty strong program around that here at SPOTIO.
Very cool. Could you give listeners an insight, like kind of what types of companies you're working with? You alluded to it a little bit, but maybe you have a couple of examples in terms of, I don't know, industry size, just to give us a feel, like, who's benefiting the most from SPOTIO? Sure.
So currently we're sort of a startup, right? We have around 9,000 active daily users, over 1,500 companies. Mm-hmm. A lot of our customers there's kind of two main audience categories. There's B2C, so home services, think roofing, pest control, solar, for home buyers. And then there's the B2B side. So merchant services, medical diagnostic services, pharma sales, it's sort of a broad range. The only common theme that we really look for in our buying audience is high volume sales, high volume activity, and transactional selling. So typically a lower ticket price or lower, opportunity size, and a lot more of them. And that tends to be our sweet spot. So when there's a lot of activity that you need to track simultaneously, that's typically when you get enough pain to justify having a purpose-built solution like SPOTIO.
That makes complete sense. What would you say, who within those companies is typically a champion for SPOTIO? Is that like a lead of operations? Is that a business owner? Is that, who, because somebody has to sort of, bring the company there to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, typically it's the sales manager, the middle manager that tends to be our biggest proponent. We have a really great value proposition for that audience. I mean, obviously, the C-suite leaders, there's a strong message there. We do help increase revenue, we help increase productivity, but the pain tends to be in that middle layer of management. You have a team of people out there in the wild, and you just need to track what they're doing on a basic level. The only way to do it today is typically by phone calls, text messages, and following them, which is not, a great way to make a living by any means. It's not scalable by any stretch of the imagination. So that tends to be the people that we have the most success in just immediately resonating, and then we empower them to kind of help us go up in the organization and activate the rest of the buying committee.
And what is quite interesting, like, what would you say to the first touch point? Like, how do they get to know about SPOTIO? What would you say is their journey looking like? Maybe, or in other words, what are the top client acquisition channels you'd say that you guys leverage for people to get to know SPOTIO and getting started?
So we are very fortunate here. My CEO has made a significant investment in our organic search program over the past 6 years, and we have the strongest SEO results I've ever seen at any company. I've worked at some big companies. Currently, we're ranking. If you Google field sales or any sales topic in general, you're probably going to find us on the first page. We have over 40 page one, rank one keywords. We rank pretty high for over 350 keywords in the space. So we are very well known, especially for the top of funnel thought leadership content. From there, we try to. It's mainly educational. We're just out of the goodness of our heart. We're just giving people the information they need to be successful, and hopefully we can kind of convert them down the funnel with some more intent-driven content. So we are actually, for the first time since I've been here, I have a heavy product marketing background. So I'm kind of mapping out that whole buyer journey and trying to figure out where are the pieces of content that we need to get a prospect from this stage to the next stage and do it automatically so that we can do some light touch. Most of our leads come inbound. Most of our entire growth has been inbound. I'd say we have about 90% marketing originated bookings, which is very high, but again, goes to the strength of the existing program we have. And we did receive Series A funding last year. So our focus, and with that comes the caveat that we need to start being more active. We need to start going outbound. We need to have a sales team that's self-prospecting and kind of bringing down leads themselves. No longer can we just sit and wait and collect leads from our website. We have to be a bit more engaged.
Maybe you need to consider field sales then.
Field sales is definitely part of it. We don't have, unfortunately, the ironic thing is our sales team is not a good fit for our own product, but one of these days we'll switch and we'll just be eating our own dog food, as they say.
That makes sense. Very good. Yeah, no, you mentioned the website, and you mentioned the important role of the website, and this, it's quite interesting, the buyer's journey that you're pinning out at the very moment. What would you say, because a lot of marketers are quite critical with their online assets typically, what would you say is sort of like a major strength? You mentioned the SEO aspect already, and sort of a major room for improvement, or a good room for improvement for that online buyer's journey that you're working at.
Yeah, so our heritage, our history has been really focused on that B2C side that I talked about earlier, and we've just recently been looking at some of these new B2B verticals. We've been taking them opportunistically, but now we're being purposeful about going after them, and we're also being purposeful about going a bit up market. Right, we have a very mature product, and so we're trying to find the larger deals, enterprise, medium to large businesses. And one of the challenges that we have is the positioning on our website doesn't necessarily reflect that. And so we are working on we're actually in the middle of it right now. This is one of my big initiatives in repositioning ourselves to be a bit more evenly focused on both those audiences. I think if a B2B buyer came through our front door today, they wouldn't necessarily see themselves in the content, the imagery, the just the language that we're using at a basic level. And so that's definitely an area for improvement. We also, from a language, and we sort of fall into the same traps of a typical SaaS technology provider, which is we talk a lot about our capabilities, our features, the awesomeness of ourselves, but we don't necessarily connect that extremely strongly to value. And so that is something that I'm cognizant of. I'm a big fan of story brand and value selling techniques, and I think trying to integrate more of that into our messaging and positioning philosophy is going to help us long term. Interesting.
I mean, you've been in you mentioned product marketing background there. You've been in marketing roles prior. You've actually even been, founder yourself. Like, what have you learned over the years? Because you talked about the website positioning, messaging. What have you learned when it comes to, actually converting folks into, for example, demos like you guys do on SPOTIO. Any tools, any methods, any approaches that you've, picked up over the years that you found helpful when it comes to, lifting up conversions?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a set of buyers that is ready to make a decision, right? And that's kind of what we were talking about before. Those are the folks who are already filling out your form. They've drank the Kool-Aid that you're selling, and they're ready to go. There's also a pretty large cohort of people that are on the fence that need a bit more of a nudge. That tends to be the area where you have to get pretty creative from a marketing standpoint, and a bit more. You have to handhold them a bit more through that process. And so, if you're just sort of passively waiting on leads to come through the door, I think you're missing a pretty big opportunity in your audience to actively sell into them and try to get them. Along with that, you need to have a compelling offer. I'm reminded recently, I got a message from Meltwater, which is another big MarTech company, and they were able to get me on the line. Normally, I would kind of shy away from this, but they had a compelling reason for me to join. They were offering me something that I couldn't get. I was using their technology. So just making sure that offer, whether it's actually monetary or something intrinsically that you're able to add value to their role, that needs to be, we need to kind of have that nailed down, and that messaging needs to flow throughout from marketing, email, to business development, to sales. We all need to kind of be beating the same drum.
Would you mind to offer to share what they offer, just from marketers who are now listening? Probably they're super curious how they got you.
They were able to, using, if you're not familiar with Meltwater, it's a pretty powerful, media, public relations, social listening kind of tool. Probably butchering that value proposition, but they were able to do a audience analysis based on a few keywords and competitor brands. And so with just a couple clicks of their application, they were kind of able to show, this is where your audience is, this is where your competitors are most active, this is where you sit. It's all native things in their application. They were able to show that. I genuinely learned a couple things from it, and it just took them 5 minutes to prepare ahead of time.
Very cool.
For SPOTIO, we do a lot of, we help do a lot of lead generation. That's part of the value that we can provide. So we try to entice people to come to the table by saying, what if we could help build you a lead list using our capabilities, and then show you how to take those leads and map them out and assign them and get your team working. And that tends to be a very fruitful conversation, because it's something that is kind of painful for a lot of sales leaders today.
I would like to switch gears a little bit. We talk about, SPOTIO, we talk about your journey as a marketer. I'm curious to learn a bit more about your sort of, personal journey. First question would be, there's so much content on growth marketing out there. You could read all day long. What's the topic that you recently bit your teeth into and really enjoyed diving deeper?
Well, we're actually looking at, this is somewhat relevant, we're actually looking at doing our own podcast or some sort of recurring thought leadership piece. Webinars are tough. Trade shows are kind of coming back, but no one's really sure what that's going to look like in the next couple of years. And so what are some alternative ways of reaching out to your audience and building kind of that thought leadership, position? And so, podcasts or clubhouses, some people call it, where you can just get different professionals together and talk about some of the trends and things that are going on in the industry. Those are something that we're definitely interested in. How you monetize those things tends to be kind of a difficult conversation, and so I've been reading up in that. Also, with the, I think, as most people know, COVID has been pretty COVID has been fairly disruptive for our space, our industry, and then marketing in general. There's a lot of new paid media strategies that, the way of doing things every 2 years, it seems to completely flip itself on its head, and then you have to sort of rethink your program. I was actually just part of a webinar yesterday where we were talking a bit about different trends in paid media and how to adapt your program, and some cool new insights. And so I think it's, as a marketer, there's never anything like brand new but especially in B2B, that's usually tried and true methods. but it's how to calibrate, how to adapt them slightly and modify them to kind of keep up with, you know, the changes in the industry. So, you know, I'm a big fan of like going and applying a similar formula for every single company I've worked at, but then you just kind of have to adapt it, and knowing how to adapt it, that's the tricky part.
Cool. I have some rapid fire questions to wrap it up for today. Are you ready for those?
Sure.
What's the last book you read?
Big sci-fi fan, so science fiction. There's a book series called Red Rising that I'm rereading for the third time. Actually, it's amazing, by Pierce Brown.
And do you explore new things in the third time?
Yeah, I mean, I get to experience it all over again and understand. I feel like on the second and third read, you get a deeper understanding of the psychology of the writer and what they're doing, and you know, kind of forecasting some of the stuff that you're going to find out later in the book. So,
very cool. What's one single thing that your company is focused on the most at the moment?
Right now, we're really focused on going outbound, as I mentioned, more active selling, and then going into new verticals and upmarket. So we've somewhat been spoiled with all of our powerful inbound strategies, and now we're having to relearn almost how to go outbound, which is almost the complete opposite of what other marketers have to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
If there would be no boundaries in tech, what's the one thing you would fix for your role today?
Man, if we could just somehow get every single MarTech and sales technology and back office system to work seamlessly right out of the box, and apply a standard process for how everything fits together and what you call things and what three-letter acronyms you're using, that would be amazing. I think that would solve, it wouldn't bring world peace, but it would solve about 70% of the challenges that we have today.
For the last question, I would like to do a bit of time travel. Let's go back to the days of Texas A&M University. Now you're heading out of formal education into the world of, you know, sales, business and marketing. What's the one advice you would give yourself for your journey?
I would say just be more purposeful about some of the opportunities that you take on as far as your early career. I actually graduated around the time of the recession, so I didn't have a whole lot of options to choose from. And so I just sort of took the first jobs that came at me. The first couple roles, while, you know, I worked with a lot of great people, really taught me more about what I don't want to do, which isn't necessarily always the best. And so it took me, I had to kind of come back into marketing in a roundabout way, and eventually got here. Yeah, that would be the one piece of advice. Don't take roles just for the money. Take them to make sure that they actually check the box intellectually and professionally.
Christian, I really appreciate you took the time with us today to be a guest on Pathmark Presents. I want to give you the very last word. If somebody would be forgetting all that we discussed about SPOTIO today, what's the one thing they should remember?
SPOTIO helps field sales achieve 23% higher revenue on average. So if you are coming away from the last quarter and you didn't hit your target, SPOTIO can most definitely help you achieve that goal.
Thanks a lot for being a guest on Pathmark Presents.
Thank you very much for having me. Have a great day.